He is no longer injured. He is no longer just a young dude trying to be cool. Austin comes first, his orgasm shaking both of them. She shudders then, the tingling sensation starting at the tips of her toes and then coursing up through her until it converges on her solar plexus and explodes. The orgasm rocks her and nearly knocks her off him, but she holds on to his long, lustrous, curly hair, landing in a heap of sweaty satisfaction in his arms. They collapse onto each other, holding each other, letting the calm return like a tide rolling back in. For the longest time they lie there in each other's arms, listening to a silence broken only by the soft, syncopated symphony of their breathing. Lily pulls a blanket over herself and comes down hard to reality. A stabbing pain starts at her temples and travels down the bridge of her nose. What has she done? As the buzz fades, a vague sense of regret knots itself in her gut and she gazes out the window. Finally, she starts to say, "Austin, listen, no." He strokes her shoulder and then begins to pull on his pants. "You don't have to say it." "Say what?" He shrugs. "I don't know. Something about this being just one of those things and we shouldn't make too much of it, and it's just the alcohol or whatever." She smiles sadly. "I wasn't going to say that." He looks at her and grins. "I just want to do the right thing by you, Lily. I don't want to pressure you or anything." She kisses him on the forehead. And then they start cleaning up their mess, picking up the spilled contents of the side table, propping lamps back in place, stacking books, and putting clothes back on. Neither of them has much more to say, although both are dying to talk about it. Sometime later, near dawn, Austin says, "You know, something's been bothering me about that feeding room down there in those garages underneath the track." She looks at him, flopping back down on the couch, exhausted. "What's that?" He swallows air. "I don't mean to be gross, but it's bothering me." "What?" He looks at her. "Okay, so the governor supposedly fed the dead pilot and the girl from the helicopter to those walkers, right?" Lily nods, not wanting to think about it. "Yeah, I guess so. Alas." He chews his lips. "Again, I don't mean to be disgusting, but I just can't shake this feeling there was something missing." "And that would be?" He looks at her. "The heads. There were no heads. Where were the fucking heads?" Chapter 10. Bruce Allen Cooper stands outside the garage door in the sub-basement beneath the arena, a single tungsten bulb in a cage above him providing the only illumination flickering in the narrow corridor. He puts the sounds coming from behind the door out of his mind. How the hell does a man go at this for so long? The angry shrieks from the black girl have now deteriorated into garbled, choked, sobbing sounds. Bruce has his big arms, as thick as stovepipes, crossed against his broad chest, and his mind keeps wandering to those pre-plague days when he ran the gas station with his dad. He would lose track of time back then as well, buried in a 427 Camaro with overhead shafts and hemispherical combustion chambers. Now he's lost track of time again. He thinks about his old girlfriend, Shauna, and how long they used to go at it. A memory that makes him happy in a vaguely melancholy way. But this is different. He's been standing there so long his legs are starting to cramp, and he keeps shifting his weight from one leg to the other. He weighs over 250 pounds and has the hard muscle of a stevedore, but this is ridiculous. He can only stand for so long. For the last 20 minutes or so, Bruce has heard the low mutterings of the governor's voice egging on the woman, taunting her, needling at her. God only knows what he's doing to her. Silence crashes down. Bruce puts his ear to the door. What the fuck is he doing to her? In the dark holding cell, the governor stands over the limp figure of the woman, buckling his pants, zipping up. The tethers on the woman's bleeding wrists are the only thing holding her ravaged body off the floor. Her labored breathing fills the silence, her dreadlocks hanging across her battered face. Tears, snot, and blood mingle and drip off her swollen lips. Catching his breath, the governor feels good and spent and flushed with exertion as he gazes down at her. His hands are sore, his knuckles skinned from working her over, repeatedly catching his fists on her teeth. He got pretty good at strangling her to the point of putting her under, but always bringing her back at the last moment with a well-timed slap or gut punch. He stayed away from her mouth as much as possible, but lavished her other orifices with a great deal of attention. The engine inside him kept him going strong, kept him sharp and hard. "Okay, I'll admit it," he says calmly to her. "I got a little carried away." She huffs and sniffs and holds on to consciousness by a slender thread. She can't lift her head, but it's obvious she wants to do so. She really wants to say something to him. The floor beneath her is puddled with fluids and blood, her long braids dangling in the mess. Her spandex shirt is riddled with gouges, torn open at her breasts. Her nude lower half, still splayed apart by the rope tethers, shimmers with sweat and shows the darker welts and abrasions of the governor's handiwork on her caramel-colored flesh. The governor stares at her. "But I don't regret a thing. I enjoyed every minute of it. What about you?" He waits to see if she says anything. She pants and heaves and lets out a garbled combination of cough, sob, and moan. He smiles. "No, I wouldn't think so." He walks over to the door and bangs on it. Then he smooths his long hair back. "We're through here," he calls out to Bruce. "Let me out." The door squeals up on ancient rollers, letting in the harsh light of the corridor. Bruce stands there as silent and stoic as a cigar store Indian. The governor doesn't even make eye contact with the man. Turning back to the woman on the floor, the governor cocks his head and studies her a moment. She's a tough one, no doubt about that. Bruce was right. There is no way in hell this bitch is going to talk, but now, the governor notices something about her that gives him an unexpected shiver of pleasure. He has to look closely to see it, with all that hair hanging down masking her features, but the noise it makes is very distinct. He notices it then and grins. She's crying. The governor revels in it. "You go ahead and cry it out, honey. Just get it all out. You earned it. You don't have anything to be ashamed of. Cry your little head off." He turns to leave. And then he pauses when he hears something else. He turns back to her and cocks his head again. For the briefest instant, he thinks he hears her say something. He listens closely, and it comes out of her between huffs of agony. Not crying for me," she says to the floor, her head lolling heavily with pain. She has to suck in shallow breaths of air in order to get the words out. Crying for you." He stares at her. She lifts her head enough to make eye contact through the curtain of wet braids. Her tawny brown face covered with mucus and blood, the tears tracking down her swollen cheeks. She stabs her gaze into him. And all the pain and despair and anguish and loss and hopelessness of this brutal plague world is displayed there for a moment, just for an instant, on her sculpted, desecrated face, until all of it is cauterized away in the space of a breath by the woman's pure, white-hot hatred. And what is left is a mask of feral kill instinct. "I think about all the things I'm gonna do to you," she says very evenly, almost calmly. "And it makes me cry. It scares me." The governor smiles. "That's cute. Get some rest as much as you can, at least. The guy's gonna be in here later to clean you up, maybe give you some bandages, maybe have a little fun himself. Mostly, he'll be getting you ready from when I come back." He winks at her. Just want to give you something to look forward to." He turns and gives her a wave over his shoulder. "Later." He walks out. The rolling door comes down with a metallic thud. The sun comes up while the governor is walking back to his place. The air smells clean, rich earth and clover, the dark mood of the catacombs washing away in the golden light and breeze of a Georgia spring morning. The governor sheds his hard demeanor along the way and steps into the skin of the benevolent town leader. He sees a few early risers and gives them neighborly waves, bidding them a good morning with the jovial smile of a town constable. He walks along with a bounce in his step now, the master of his little fiefdom, thoughts of breaking women and controlling outsiders evaporating, stuffed back down into the lower compartments of his brain. The sounds of truck engines and nails going into new timber already fill the air, Martinez and his crew fortifying the new sections of the barricade. Approaching his building, the governor runs into a woman and her 2 children, the little boys scampering across the street. The governor chuckles at the kids stepping out of their way. "Mornin'," he says to the mother with a nod. Preoccupied with her brood, the woman, a matronly gal from Augusta, shouts at the boys. "Kids, please, I told you to stop running." She turns to Philip and gives him a demure little smile. "Morning, Governor." The man walks on, and he sees Bob hunched on the sidewalk near his steps. "Bob, please," he says as he walks over to the ragged wreck of a human being hunkered down under an awning next to the governor's entrance. "Get some food. I hate to see you wasting away like this. We got rid of the barter system. They'll just give you something." Bob gurgles and lets out a belch. "Fine. Okay. If it'll get Mother Hen off my back." "Thanks, Bob," the governor says, heading for his foyer. "I worry about you." Bob mumbles something that sounds like, "Whatever." The governor goes inside his building. A fly, a huge bluebottle, buzzes over the staircase. The hallways are as silent as empty crypts. Inside his apartment, he finds his dead baby girl crouching on the floor of the living room, staring emptily down at the stained carpet, making little noises that sound almost like snores. The stench wafts around her. The governor goes to her, filled with affection. I know, he says to her lovingly. "Sorry I was out so late. Or early, depending on how you look at it." She roars suddenly, a screechy growl that comes out of her like the squeal of a tortured cat, and she springs to her feet and lunges at him. He slaps her, hard, backhanding her, sending her slamming against the wall. "Behave yourself, goddammit!" She staggers and gazes up at him through milk glass eyes. An expression like fear flutters across her livid blue face, twitches at her lipless rictus of a mouth, and makes her look oddly sheepish and docile. The sight of it makes the governor deflate. "I'm sorry, honey." He wonders if she's hungry. "What's got you so riled lately?" He notices her bucket is overturned. "No food, huh?" He goes over and picks up the bucket, shoving a severed foot back into it. "You need to be more careful. If you knock your bucket over, it'll roll out of your reach. I raised you better than this." He looks inside the bucket. The contents have decomposed severely. The severed foot looks so bloated and livid it resembles a balloon. Furry with mold, radiating an indescribable stench that literally leaches tears from the eyes. The body parts stew in a thick, viscous substance with which pathologists are all too familiar. The yellow, bile-like goo that is essentially the signal that advanced decomposition has started. That all the maggots and blowflies have departed and left behind a mass of drying proteins. "You don't want that, do you?" the governor asked the dead girl, plucking the swollen, blackened foot distastefully from the bin. He holds it with thumb and index finger, forming a pincer-like tongue, and tosses it to the creature. "Here, go ahead." She gobbles the morsel on her hands and knees, her back arched with simian fervor. She seems to stiffen suddenly at the taste of it. She grunts as she spits out the chewed particles. The governor just sadly shakes his head as he turns away and heads for the dining room, chastising her over his shoulder. "See? You knocked your bucket over and now your food is spoiled. That's what you get." He lowers his voice, adding under his breath, "Even fresh. I don't see how you eat that stuff. Really." He collapses into his Barcalounger, the chair creaking as it reclines. Eyelids heavy, joints aching, his genitals sore from all the exertion. He lies back and thinks about the time he actually tasted Penny's food. It was late one night about 3 months ago, and the governor was drunk and trying to get the dead child to calm down. It happened almost spontaneously. He simply grabbed a piece of tissue, part of a human finger. He can't even remember its original owner, and popped it in his mouth. Contrary to all the jokes, it did not taste even remotely like chicken. It had a bitter, metallic, gamey taste, coppery like blood, but with a mouthfeel similar to extremely tough, extremely granular stew meat, and he had immediately spit it out. There's an axiom among gourmets that the food that is closest in genetic makeup to its consumer is the most delicious, the most succulent, the most satisfying. Hence the existence of exotic dishes among Eastern cultures, such as trepanned chimpanzee brains and various sweetbreads. But Philip Blake knows this belief to be a lie. Humans taste like shit. Perhaps if served raw with seasoning, human tartare, let's say, the tissue and organs might be tolerable, but the governor has yet to be in the mood to experiment. "I'd get you some more food, honey," he softly calls out now to the tiny cadaver in the other room, his body relaxing as he drifts off in his recliner to the soothing sounds of bubbles percolating in the shadows across the dining room. The soft, hissing noises of aquariums are omnipresent in the apartment, like white noise or static from a defunct television station. "But Daddy's tired today. Needs some shut-eye. So you'll have to wait, honey, till I wake up." He falls fast asleep to the drone of burbling water tanks and has no idea how long he's been out when the sound of knocking penetrates his slumber and makes him sit up with a jerk. At first he thinks it's Penny making noise in the other room, but then he hears it again, harder this time, coming from the back door. "This better be good," he mumbles as he trudges across the apartment. He opens the back door. "What?" "Here's what you asked for," Gabe says, standing outside the storm door holding a blood-speckled metal container. The thick-necked man looks grim and jumpy, uncertain of the prevailing mood, glancing over his shoulder. The ammo box he's holding, procured from the guard station, has been serving them well as a makeshift bio-container. He looks at the governor. "The two from the helicopter." He blinks. "Oh, and I put something else in there." Another blink. "Didn't know if you'd want to keep it. You can just get rid of it if you don't want it." "Thanks," the governor mumbles, taking the container from him. The metal is warm and sticky from the blood. "Make sure I get some sleep, okay? Don't let anyone else up here." "Okay, boss." Gabe turns and descends the stairs quickly, happy to be rid of the package. The governor shuts the door, turns, and heads back to his dining room. Penny lurches at him as he passes, stretching her chain, snuffling at him, reaching her spindly little dead arms for the goodies. She can smell the mortified flesh. Her eyes are big silver coins locked onto the box. "No," the governor scolds her. "This ain't for you, honey." She snarls and sputters. He pauses. "Well, okay, hold on." Thinking it over, he pries open the top and reaches into the container. Wet, fleshy objects are enclosed inside large Ziplocs. One of the objects, a severed human hand curled like a fleshy white crab frozen in death, brings a smirk to the governor's lips. "I suppose you can have this." He pulls out the hand once belonging to the intruder named Rick and tosses it to the girl. "That should keep you quiet long enough for me to doze off." The dead child goes to town on the dripping appendage, making lusty slurping noises, cartilage crackling like chicken bones in her black little teeth. The governor walks away, carrying the container around the corner and into the dining room. In the dimly lit chamber, the governor pulls the other two objects from their bags. "You guys have got guests," he says to somebody in the shadows, kneeling down and pulling a severed female head from the plastic. The dripping cranium belongs to the woman named Christina. The expression fixed on its face, now as doughy, puffy, and soft as unbaked bread, is one of unadulterated horror. "New neighbors, actually." He opens the top of an empty aquarium, which is pushed against the far wall, and drops the news producer's head into the fluid. "You can keep each other company," he says softly, almost tenderly, as he drops the second cranium, the one belonging to the pilot, into the murky water of an adjacent aquarium. He lets out a sigh. The housefly buzzes somewhere nearby, invisible, incessant. "Gotta get off my feet now." He returns to his chair and plops down with a weary, satisfied groan. 26 aquariums bubble softly across the room, each one containing at least 2, some of them as many as 3 or 4, reanimated human heads. The filters pop and gurgle, the top lights humming softly. Each apparatus is connected to a master power strip, its anaconda-thick cord running across the baseboard and up the corner of the wall to a generator on the building's roof. Encapsulated in their green vials of water, rows of livid, discolored faces twitch as though invisible puppet strings are tugging at them. Eyelids as thin and veined as ancient dried leaves blink at random intervals, the cataract-filmed eyeballs fixed on passing reflections and shadows refracted by the water. Mouths gape open and snap shut intermittently, like a perpetual whack-a-mole game spanning the length of the glass panels. The governor has collected the heads over the course of 12 months with the care of a museum curator. The selection process is instinctive, the effect of all these dead faces quite mysterious. He leans back in his chair, the springs squeaking as the footrest levitates. He lounges there, the heaviness of exhaustion pressing down on him as he stares at the totality of faces. He barely notices the new visage, the head of a woman once known for brilliant segment producing at WROM Fox Atlanta, now gasping and spewing bubbles from her insensate mouth. The governor sees only the whole, the totality of all the heads, the larger impression of all these random victims. The screams of that skinny black gal in the underground vault are still reverberating in the back of his mind. The part of him that is repulsed by such behavior still whines and objects in a deeper partition of his brain. How could you do that to another human being? He stares at the heads. How could anybody do that to another person? He gapes harder at those pale, bloated visages. The nauseating horror of all those helpless faces, gasping for a deliverance that will never come, is so bleak, so grim, so perfectly timely that it once again somehow penetrates Philip Blake's rumination and cleanses him. Somehow, it seals his wounded psyche with the caustic nature of reality. It inoculates him from doubt, from hesitation, from mercy, from empathy. This, after all, could be how we all end up. Heads floating in tanks for eternity. Who's to say? This is the logical extreme, a constant reminder of what is waiting if one is weak for 1 millisecond. The heads represent the old Philip Blake, the weak one, the milquetoast, the eternal complainer. How could you do this horrible thing? How could anyone do such a thing? He stares. The heads gird him, empower him, energize him. His voice drops a full octave and comes out in barely a murmur. 57 channels and nothing on. How could you? He ignores the voice inside him and gets sleepy, staring at those moving mouths, bubbling and twitching and screaming their silent, watery screams. How? He sinks into the darkness of sleep, staring, absorbing. He begins to dream, the nightmare world seeping into the real world, and he is running through a dark forest. He tries to scream, but his voice won't make a sound. He opens his mouth and lets out a silent cry. No sound comes out of him. Only bubbles, which spew up into the darkness and vanish. The woods close in on him. He stands still, fists clenched, white-hot rage flowing out of him, pouring out of his mouth. Burn it all down. Burn it all. Destroy it. Destroy everything. Now. Now. Now! The governor jerks awake some time later. He can't tell at first if it's day or night. His legs have fallen asleep and his neck aches from lolling at an odd angle on the armchair's headrest. He gets up and goes into the bathroom and gets himself together. Standing at the mirror, he can hear the low snoring groans of his little girl chained to the wall in the other room. The wind-up alarm clock on the commode tells him it's almost noon. He feels refreshed, strong. He has a busy day ahead of him. He uses pumice soap to wash away the black lady's blood from under his fingernails. He cleans up, changes into fresh clothes, and has a quick breakfast. Powdered milk for his post-toasties, instant coffee heated on a sterno can, and he gives Penny another fresh morsel from the steel container. "Daddy's got to go to work," he says cheerfully to the tiny corpse as he heads for the door. He grabs his gun and the walkie-talkie charging by the door. "I love you, honey. Stay out of trouble while I'm gone." On his way out of the building, he gets Bruce on the two-way. "Meet me at the track," he says into the mouthpiece. "At the top of the service entrance." He thumbs the walkie off without waiting for an answer. 10 minutes later, the governor stands at the apex of a greasy staircase which leads down into the cavernous, dark underground maze. The sky over the racetrack looks threatening, the day turning dark and blustery. "Hey, boss," the big bald man says as he lopes up from the parking lot. "Where the hell have you been?" "I came right over, I'm sorry." The governor glances over his shoulder, a few passers-by catching his eye. He lowers his voice. "What's the situation with the woman?" "Still talking to herself. Bitch is bug fuck crazy, you ask me." "Is she cleaned up?" "Yeah. Pretty much. Albert paid her a visit, looked her over, gave her some food, which she didn't touch. I guess she has some water, that's about it." "She's still awake?" "Yep, far as I can tell. I looked in on her about an hour ago." "What was her demeanor?" "What?" The governor sighs. "Demeanor, Bruce. Her mood. What the fuck was she doing?" Bruce shrugs. "I don't know. Just staring at the floor, talking to the voices in her head." He licks his lips. "Can I ask you a question?" "What?" "Is she telling you anything? Giving you any information?" The governor runs his fingers through his long hair. "I'm not asking her anything, so there's nothing for her to tell me, is there?" Bruce furrows his brow, looks at him. "You're not asking her anything?" "That's right." "Mind if I ask why?" The governor glances off into the distance at the plumes of exhaust puffing out of a bulldozer moving earth against the barricade, the workmen securing the last sections, the buzz of engines and hammers filling the air. "That's coming," he says, thinking about it. "Speaking of that, I want you to do something for me. Where's the young one being kept?" "The Asian kid? He's on B level, in the warehouse room next to the infirmary. I want you to move him to the stall right next to the woman's." Bruce's brow furrows deeper, the folds and creases spreading up across his bald head. "Okay, but you want him to hear what's going on in that room?" The governor gives him a cold smile. "You ain't so dumb, Brucey. I want that kid to hear everything I do to that bitch tonight. Then one of them'll talk. Trust me." Bruce starts to say something else when the governor turns and walks away without another word. In the dusty stillness of her apartment, Lily and Austin each managed to grab a few hours of restless sleep that morning, and when they finally awaken around 1 o'clock, the convivial atmosphere of the previous night has transformed into a series of awkward negotiations. "Oh, sorry," Austin says when he pushes the door to the bathroom open and finds Lily on the toilet in her Georgia Tech t-shirt with her panties around her ankles. Austin turns away immediately. "No problem," she says. "Can you just give me a minute or two? Then it's all yours." "Absolutely," he says, thrusting his hands in his pockets and pacing the hallway. Earlier that morning he had dozed off on the floor of the living room, covered in a packing blanket from the truck, while Lily slept in the bedroom on her broken-down futon. From the hallway, Austin calls to her. "You got time to give me another lesson today?" "You're really a glutton for punishment," she says inside the bathroom, flushing the toilet and getting herself together at the mirror. She comes out and gives him a good-natured punch in the arm. "What do you say we give that side a chance to heal up first?" "What are you doing tonight?" "Tonight? I can make you dinner," he says, his eyes bright and guileless. "Oh, wow." Lily wants so badly to say the right thing. She doesn't want to lose Austin as a friend. Contrary emotions roil through her as she searches for the right words. She feels at once closer to him and strangely alienated from him. The fact is, she can't ignore her feelings for the scruffy young man. He is good-hearted, ballsy, loyal, and, she might as well admit it to herself, an amazing lover. But what does she really know about him? What does anybody really know about anybody in this fucked-up new society? Is Austin one of those old-school men who think sex seals the deal? And for that matter, why can't Lily just surrender to her tender feelings for him? What's wrong with her? The answer is elusive. Fear, self-preservation, guilt, self-loathing. She can't quite put her finger on it, but she knows one thing for sure. She's not ready for a relationship, not yet. And she can tell by the look in the young man's eyes right now he's already halfway there. Lily finally says, "Let me think about it." He looks crestfallen. "Lily, it's just dinner. I'm not asking you to pick out furniture." "I know, I need to think about it." "Did I do something wrong?" "No, not at all. It's just..." She pauses. "It's just that..." He gives her a grin. "Please don't say, 'It's not you, it's me.'" She laughs. "Okay, I'm sorry. All I'm saying is, just give me some time." He gives her a little bow. "You got it, milady. I will give you time and space." He goes out into the living room and gathers his gun, his coat, and his knapsack, and she follows him to the front door. They go outside. "Looks like a storm brewing," Austin says, glancing up at the dark cloud cover. "That it does," she says, squinting up at the gray light, her headache returning. He starts to descend the steps when Lily reaches out and gently tugs on his arm. "Austin, wait." She searches for the proper words. "I'm sorry. I'm being ridiculous. I just want to take it slow. What happened last night..." He takes her by the arms, looks deep into her eyes and says, "What happened last night was beautiful, and I don't want to fuck it up." His face softens. He touches her hair and plants a platonic little smack on the side of her face. He does this without guile, without premeditation. He simply kisses her temple with great tenderness. "You want to know the truth of the matter?" He looks into her eyes. "You're totally worth the wait." And with that, he shuffles down the steps and plods off into the gathering storm. The rain comes in waves that afternoon. Martinez has to suspend the last of the construction on the northeast corner of the rampart, and he and his crew relocate under the awnings along the derelict train station, where they stand around, smoking, watching the weather and keeping an eye on the woods to the north. Walker's sightings have increased over the last few weeks out there in the thickets and swamps behind the palisades of white pines. Now the curtain of rain unfurls from the heavens, strafing the forest and washing out the meadows. The sky unleashes volleys of thunder, while veins of lightning crackle off the horizon. It's an angry storm, biblical in its volume and fury, and it makes Martinez nervous. He smokes his filterless cigarette with a vengeance. He rolls his own, sucking it down to the nub as he gazes at the storm. The last thing he needs right now is drama. But that very moment, it comes around the corner in the form of Lily Call. She hurries across the adjacent lot with her jean jacket held high over her head to ward off the rain. She approaches with an anxious expression on her face, hustling under the temporary shelter, out of breath, shaking the moisture from her jacket. "Jesus Christ, that came on quick," she pants at Martinez. "Afternoon, Lily," he says, stubbing out his cigarette on the pavement. She catches her breath, looking around. "How's it going?" "It's going." "What's happening with the interlopers?" "The who?" "The strangers," she says, wiping her face. "The ones came in the other night." "What about them?" Martinez gives her a shrug, glancing nervously over his shoulder at his men. "I don't have anything to do with that." "Aren't they being questioned?" She looks at him. "What's wrong?" He gives her a strange look. "You weren't even supposed to know about that." "About what?" Martinez grabs her, leads her away from the men over to the far edge of the awning. The rain has settled into a steady downpour, and now the jet engine hum of the storm masks their conversation. "Look," Martinez says to her, measuring his words. "This has nothing to do with us, and I would advise you stay out of it." "What the hell's the matter? I just asked a simple question." "The governor wants to keep it on the down low. He doesn't want people to worry about it." She sighs. "I'm not worried about it. I was just curious if you found anything out." "I don't know, and I don't want to know." "What the hell is the matter with you?" Anger flares in Martinez's gut, traveling up his spine and drying his mouth. He wants to strangle this busybody. He grabs her by the shoulders. "Listen to me. I got enough problems. I have to deal with this shit too. Stay out of it. Just leave it alone." Lily pulls away. "Whoa, Kimosabe. Back off." She rubs her shoulder. "I don't know who pissed in your cereal this morning, but you can take it out on somebody else." Martinez takes deep breaths, looking at her. "Okay, look. I'm sorry, but we're on a need-to-know basis here. The governor knows what he's doing. If there's something we need to know, he'll tell us." Lily waves him off, turns and walks away in the rain, mumbling, "Whatever." Martinez watches her vanish in the mist. "He knows what he's doing," he says again, softly, under his breath, as though trying to convince himself. Chapter 11. The rains continue, an unremitting deluge over south-central Georgia for nearly 3 straight days. It's not until midweek that the weather moves on, leaving flash floods and downed power lines in its wake all the way to the eastern seaboard. The land around Woodbury is left drenched and bound up in mud holes and washouts, the fallow fields to the south so sodden and inundated that the men on the wall notice clusters of walkers driven out of the woods, wallowing in the flooded areas like giant glistening leeches climbing on top of each other. It's like shooting fish in a fishbowl for the .50 caliber gunners on the northeast and southeast corners of the barricade. But other than these noisy, gruesome little displays of what the governor has started calling waste management, the town of Woodbury remains almost eerily calm that week. In fact, it's not until the end of that week that Lily notices something amiss. Up until then, she keeps a low profile, spending most of her days inside, honoring Martinez's directive to keep any news of hostile strangers in their midst to herself. She passes the time reading, watching the rain, thinking, and lying awake at night agonizing over what to do about Austin. On Thursday, he shows up at her door with a bottle of wine that he nicked from the old storage room at the courthouse, along with the bouquet of Russian sage he picked down by the post office. And she is so touched by the gesture that she lets him in, but insists that he avoid the subject of their relationship or any mention of that night they went over the line. He seems happy just to spend time with her. They polish off the entire bottle of wine playing Pictionary. At one point, Austin makes her laugh so hard she does a spit take when he reveals that his drawing, which appears to be a fried egg, is his brain on drugs. And he doesn't leave until the gray light of dawn is playing at the seams of the boarded windows. The next day, Lily has to admit to herself that she likes this guy, regardless of the awkward circumstances. And maybe, just maybe, she would be open to the possibilities. Then Sunday morning comes. Exactly 1 week after the fateful night, Lily awakens with a start sometime before dawn. Something amorphous and unformed in the back of her mind has been bothering her, and for some reason, be it something she dreamed or something that percolated down through her subconscious over the course of that week, it strikes her full force right then, that morning, like a ball-peen hammer right between the eyes. She jumps out of bed and hurries across the room, tearing open a 3-ring binder lying on a makeshift desk of 2 cinder blocks and a plywood panel. Frantically, she rifles through the pages. "Oh no. No, no, no," she utters under her breath as she searches through her calendar. For almost a year, she has been religiously keeping track of the date, for many different reasons. She wants to know when the holidays fall. She wants to know when the seasons turn, and most of all, she simply wants to keep in touch with the old order, with civilized life, with normalcy. She wants to stay connected with the passage of time, although there are many in this dark era who have given up, who don't know their Arbor Day from their Yom Kippur. She looks at the date and slams the calendar shut with a gasp. "Oh, shit. Fuck. Shit," she mutters to herself, backing away from the desk and whirling around as though the floor is about to drop away from under her feet. She paces a nervous circle in the dark bedroom for a moment, her thoughts swimming and crashing into each other. It can't be the 23rd. It can't be. She's imagining this whole thing. She's just paranoid. But how can she be sure? How can anybody be sure of anything in this fucked-up plague world? There must be something she can do to set her mind at ease, to prove to herself she's just being paranoid. All at once, she freezes and gets an idea. That's it. She snaps her fingers and then rushes over to the old battered metal armoire in the corner where she keeps her coats and guns and ammo. She grabs her denim waistcoat, her twin Ruger 22s, the silencers, and a pair of 25-round banana clips. She puts on her coat and then screws on the silencer attachments and shoves the guns behind her belt. She stows the clips in her pockets, takes a deep breath, raises her collar, and heads out the door. Her breath shows in the pre-dawn air as she emerges from her building. The town is still asleep, and the sun is just peeking out from behind the east woods, sending angelic rays of light across low-lying motes of fog as Lily crosses the street and pants quickly down the narrow sidewalk toward the old derelict post office. Just beyond the post office, on the other side of the south wall outside the safe zone, stands a ransacked drugstore. Lily needs to get into that store just for a second in order to find out if she's crazy or not. There's only one problem. It's outside the wall. And with the passing of the rainstorm, walker activity has picked up out there. In the dimly lit sub-basement beneath the racetrack arena, Bruce hears the telltale banging on the inside of the last garage door on the left. He braces himself for what he's about to see, leans down, unsnaps the lock, grasps the release and yanks the door up on its congealed rollers. The door shrieks. The opening reveals a dark cement enclosure once used to store greasy chassis and spare parts, now a place of degradation and pain. The governor is standing in the gloom, breathless from all the hard work. "That's entertainment," he mutters, his face shiny with sweat, the dark wet spots under his armpits and the blood on his hands worse than they were after the last session 2 days ago. He worked on the woman all night, the 3rd round of torture this week. And now the fatigue and the toll it's taking on the man show in his sunken gaze. For a brief instant, Bruce glimpses the ragged figure on the floor behind the governor. Her torso hangs inches above the floor, the ropes barely keeping her aloft, her braids dangling, fluids dripping off her swollen face. Her narrow shoulders heave rhythmically, lungs gasping for air, her nude lower half crumpled like a broken doll. She is barely alive, at least at first glance. Although on closer inspection, one might note a furnace burning behind her hemorrhaged eyes, a nuclear reactor of rage keeping her awake. keeping her clinging to a thin hope of vengeance. "Close it," the governor says, grabbing a towel draped over Bruce's shoulder. Bruce obliges, slamming the rolling door to the deck with a metallic clang. The governor towels off his face. "She ain't ever gonna talk. How many times we've been at it now? 3, 4? I lost count." He tosses the towel. "What about the kid? He break yet?" Bruce shakes his head. "Gabe says he's been hearing everything through the wall. Says he's been blubbering like a baby, day in and day out. Hasn't let up since you started in on her." The governor sniffs, stretching his overworked neck muscles, cracking his bloody knuckles. "But he didn't give anything up, did he?" Bruce shrugs. "According to Gabe, he just bawled, and that's about it. Wouldn't talk." "That tears it." The governor takes deep breaths, thinking, turning things over in his mind. "These people are tighter than I thought. Tough fucking nuts to crack." Bruce considers it. "Can I make a suggestion?" "What's that?" Bruce shrugs again. "In the joint, to break people in solitary." The governor looks at him. "So? So what I'm thinking, we just keep 'em locked up, separated, like solitary fucking confinement. Might be the easiest way to do it." "This ain't no prison, Bruce. I got a town to—" The governor blinks, cocking his head at a sudden revelation. "Wait a minute." Bruce looks at him. "What is it, boss?" "Wait. Hold on a second." "What?" The governor stares at the big black man. "Didn't Gabe say those riot suits they came dressed in was the kind of shit they use in prisons?" Bruce silently nods, looking around the corridor, thinking about it. The governor starts toward the stairs, muttering as he goes. "Now that I think of it, that Rick dude was wearing a prison jumpsuit under his gear." Bruce hurries after him. "Where you going, boss?" The governor is already climbing the steps, calling over his shoulder. "Clean that bitch up, and then get Gabe, and meet me at the infirmary. I think I got a better way to do this." Lily pauses next to the wall, heart racing, the sun now fully risen. The early morning rays of light hammering down on the back of her neck. 50 yards away, one of Martinez's men, his husky form silhouetted against the dawning sky, strolls along a makeshift catwalk. Lily waits until the guard passes behind a bench stack and then makes her move. She quickly scuttles up and over the wall, landing hard on a parkway of gravel on the other side. The impact of her boots on the rocks makes a loud crunch, and she crouches down for a moment, her pulse quickening, waiting to see whether or not the guard notices her. After a moment of breathless silence, she silently duck-walks across the gravel road and slips behind a burned-out building. She checks her gun, jacking the slide. She keeps it at her side as she moves on, plodding down a side road strewn with wreckage and heaps of decomposing headless walkers. The stench is extraordinary. The cold wind blows the smell around her like a net as she passes the post office, staying low, creeping silently past old torn posters of happy postmen handing colorful packages to children, and graffiti-splashed placards of smiling retirees collecting stamps. She hears shuffling noises behind her, leaves on wind maybe, and doesn't look back. She keeps heading south. The bombed-out remains of Gold Star Sundries and Drugs sits at the end of the road, a tiny box of crumbling red brick with a bullet-riddled boarded front window. The old RX sign, a big mortar and pestle, hangs by frayed cables, twisting in the breeze. She hurries up to the entrance. The door is jammed shut, and she has to plow through it with one shoulder. She bursts into the store's dark interior, the glass from the broken door raining down on the floor. Her heart thrums in her chest as she surveys the disaster area that once offered cough medicine, denture creams, and cotton balls to farm wives and sniffling locals. The aisles have been completely ransacked, the shelves scoured clean, only a few empty cartons and puddles of unidentified fluids lying here and there. She weaves through the detritus and heads toward the pharmacy counter in the shadowy rear aisles. A noise gets her attention to her immediate right. A hiss of air, a bottle overturning, and her gun immediately goes up. She sees a blur of yellow fur. She lets up on the hammer when she realizes it's a feral cat, the ragged creature darting between fallen displays of mouthwash and teeth whitener with a mouse in its jaws. Lily lets out a thin breath of relief, turns back toward the pharmacy counter, and she suddenly screams. The old pharmacist lumbers out of the shadows next to her with reaching arms and blackened, gnarled hands curling into claws, his gigantic rotting mouth working like a wood chipper. His long, jowly face is the consistency of bread pudding, filmed in mildew the color of old rust, his milk pot eyes as huge as hard-boiled eggs. He wears a white coat desecrated by blood and bile. Lily jerks backward, raising the gun and knocking over a display of dog food. She falls on her ass, cans clattering to the floor all around her, the air knocked out of her lungs, and she starts firing. The clap of silenced gunfire sparks and flares and reverberates through the tight space. Half the rounds going high, shattering fluorescent tubes, but half the slugs go into the balding head of the pharmacist. Cranial bones shatter and fly, blood and tissue spattering the empty shelves. The giant biter falls like an old oak, landing directly on Lily. She screams and writhes beneath the reeking dead weight of the corpse, the stench unbearable. Finally, she rolls free. For several frenzied, silent moments, she crouches there on the floor next to the fallen biter. She swallows back the repulsion, the urge to flee this hideous, dark store, the voice in the back of her head telling her she's crazy, she's insane to be risking her life for this ridiculous little bit of personal reconnaissance. She drives the thoughts away and manages to get her bearings back. The pharmacy counter lies in darkness 20 feet away. Lily cautiously negotiates the rear aisle, her eyes adjusting slowly to the gloom. She sees the counter, swamped with sticky, drying fluids, wadded documents, and mold so thick it looks like a coat of fur over everything. She squeezes through the pass gate and starts rifling through the meager contents of the pharmacy shelves. Nothing but useless drugs and tinctures remain unscathed by the looters. Acne medicines, hemorrhoid treatments, and cryptically named medicines nobody bothered to identify. All the valuable central nervous system drugs and opiates and painkillers long gone. But she doesn't care. She's not looking to get high or knock herself out or block pain. After a seemingly endless, agonizing search, she finally finds what she's looking for on the floor under the computer terminal, in a pile of discarded boxes and plastic pill vials. There's only one box left, and it looks as though someone stepped on it at some point. Smashed flat, its top broken open, the container still holds its contents in a sealed, intact blister pack. Lily stuffs it into her pocket, rises to her feet, and gets the hell out of there. 15 minutes later, she has returned to her apartment with the kit. 5 minutes after that, she waits to see if her life is about to change. "He was a good man," a muffled voice is saying on the other side of the closed infirmary door. Unmistakable in its sardonic tone, its faint accent, its weary sarcasm. Clearly the voice of the estimable Dr. Stevens. Emphasis on was. The governor stands outside the door to the infirmary with Gabe and Bruce. The three men pause before going in, listening to the low murmuring on the other side of the door with great interest. "We found this town pretty early on," the doctor's voice continues. "The National Guard station, the narrow alleys. We decided we could defend this place, so we staked our claim." There's a brief beat of silence, the faint sound of water running. "Started out he was tough," the voice goes on. "But he got the job done." The governor balls his fists as he listens, the anger stiffening his spine, mixing with the sheer adrenaline of discovery. "Philip emerged as the leader of our group very quickly," the voice is saying. "He did what had to be done, what needed to be done to keep people safe. But after a while, the rage jolts up the governor's spinal cord, tingles in his fingers, fills his mouth with bitter, flinty bile. He leans toward the door to listen more closely. It was clear to some of us that he was doing this more out of enjoyment than the need to protect us. It was clear that he was little more than an evil bastard. I can't even talk about his daughter. The governor has heard enough. He reaches for the doorknob, but something stops him. On the other side of the door, A deeper, huskier voice with a thick working-class Kentucky accent is speaking. Why do you allow it to go on? The fights. Feeding the zombies. The doctor's voice. What do you think he'd do to anyone who opposed him? I hate the son of a bitch, but I can't do anything. Whatever else he does, he keeps these people safe. That's enough for most people. The governor swallows back the urge to break the door down with a battering ram and kill them all. The doctor. As long as there's a wall between them and the biters, they're not too concerned with who's with them on their side of the wall. Philip Blake kicks the door in, the lock bolt snapping off and flying across the room, skipping across the tile floor like a spent shell casing. The door bangs against the adjacent wall, making everybody in the room jump. Well said, Doctor, the governor says as he calmly saunters into the infirmary, followed closely by his associates. Well said. If it's possible for an entire room to bristle with static electricity, that's exactly what happens in that ensuing instant in which the eyes of everyone, Stevens, the stranger sitting on the bed, Alice over by the sink, snap toward the thin man strolling into the infirmary with hands on his hips like he owns the place. The coolly amused expression on the governor's face is belied by the sullen, baleful expressions on the faces of Bruce and Gabe, who enter like attack dogs on the heels of their master. What do you want? The doctor finally manages in a taut tone. You said to come in today, Doc. The governor replies with the casual congeniality of just another patient arriving for a checkup. You want to check my bandage? He points helpfully at his wounded ear. Remember? The governor then shoots a glance at the intruder, now frozen in a sitting position on the bed across the room. Bruce, point a gun at Lefty over there. The big black man calmly draws a silver-plated .357 and trains it on the man named Rick. Sit down, Philip, the doctor says. I'll make it quick. His voice dips into a lower register, dripping with contempt. I'm sure you have more important things to do. The governor flops down on an examination gurney flooded with halogen light. The man named Rick cannot take his eyes off the governor, and the governor returns his gaze. Two natural predators in the wild, backs arched, sizing each other up. And the governor smiles. You're looking well, stranger. Healing up nicely? He waits for the stranger to reply, but the man does not say a word. Well, the governor mutters to himself as Stevens moves in and bends down to take a closer look at the bandaged ear. As nice as you can. At last, the sandy-haired man across the room manages a retort. So, when do you start torturing me? You? Never. The governor's eyes positively twinkle with derision. I pegged you from the start. You're not going to say shit. You've got family back wherever you're from. You're not about to sell them out. Stevens carefully folds back the bandage and shines a penlight on the mangled ear. Nah, I was going to torture the others in front of you, the governor explains. I didn't think you'd crack, but I was pretty sure one of them would. Now he winks. But plans changed. The man on the bed glances at the muzzle of Bruce's long-barrel magnum and then says, To what? You're going into the arena, the governor tells him cheerfully. I want to at least get some entertainment out of you. He looks away with a faint grin. I'm currently planning on raping the dog shit out of that bitch who took off my ear until she finds a way to kill herself. The room, almost as a whole organism, absorbs this in thunderstruck silence. The strange tableau stretches,